This Real Agriculture podcast is brought to you by Genesis Fertilizers. Nitrogen fertilizer is your farm's #1 expense. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. Security and earnings through ownership is the solution. Visit Genesis today at genesisfertilizers.com to learn more.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, January 24th. On this episode of The Word, it's Bell Let's Talk Day. We just gotta mention that. Some really cool yield information. Wheat, and more wheat. A good cover crop discussion, I hope, at towards the end, and probably a whole lot of other things just along the way. Let's go. First off, yes, Bell Let's Talk Day. Now, first off, it's great that Bell does this. It's great that mental health is in the media and people are thinking about it. But it shouldn't just be one day. I've said this before. It should be all year long. Nonetheless, it is Wednesday, the 24th of January, 2024. So on the 24th of 24, yep, it's Bell Let's Talk Day. Do the Wheat Pete thing. Retweet. There is some money that would go to mental health. If you're on social media, you might as well tweet out something about that. But you know what astounds me is that I've talked about this enough now. I guess people know that I care or that I support it or something. Wow. The number of people that come up to me with just a quick anecdote or story or how they're feeling and what's dragging them down or pulling at them. It is a huge thing to keep a positive attitude. Even Wheat Pete struggles occasionally, and I try hard to keep positive, but man, you just never know what struggles people are going through. It is Bell Let's Talk Day. Please take it as it's a stormy Wednesday. It's raining. Pick up the phone, call somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Make the effort. It's absolutely worth it. It just makes such a huge difference. Even if that person's feeling great, they will feel even better after you talk to them. Okay, going to move on. And Brett, yes, I know that the temperatures are warming up. Who cares? It's winter wheat. It will be fine. Some really interesting data at the Cereal Crop Committee meeting yesterday. And Gavin Humphreys, we're looking at winter barley again. And Gavin, of course, the wheat breeder from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. He has both the Ottawa location and the Harrow location. And at Harrow, man, they can get winter wheat to survive. They plant it, October 10th, I think, or 13th, does fine. You go to Ottawa, ooh, yeah, winter hardiness is just like they planted a trial, I think even mid-September, and very few varieties survived very well, and yield was directly correlated to winter survival. So not all crops are winter wheat, but man, winter wheat, we've had these conditions before. Will it break dormancy? It'll likely go to stage 2 dormancy, but it's still going to be cold hardy. Don't worry about it. The wheat will be fine. Actually, the rain is way worse on the wheat. Wet feet is much worse than cold temperatures in Ontario most of the time. Okay, hey, go to the Agricor website because they have posted their yield maps. And oh my gosh, some things are predictable. Oh yeah. So if you can imagine, there's now whole counties in Ontario that get basically over 240 bushel per acre corn, like almost every farmer, over 60 bushel soybeans. And so you kind of go, Kent County. Oh yeah, that's where Woody Van Arkel farms. Everybody follows Woody, and Woody does such a great job. So you kind of can say, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's also gorgeous soil and clay loam, highly productive, lots of heat. That doesn't hurt either. You go to Oxford, 100%. Yep, there we are again. Over 60, over 240, and that's just such nice soil. The sandy loam, silt loam, great water holding capacity, great depth to that soil, good internal drainage. So that doesn't come as a surprise. The big surprise on the corn front, look at Essex County. Oh my gosh, heavy soil. And the corn yields, like normally Essex can pull out some good soybean yields, but it's normally not a corn county. Wowzers. It did really well. And then we go to Eastern Ontario. And of course, right where my good friend Warren Schneckenberger farms, man, yep, they're dark green, high yields, certainly over 200 corn. I'm not sure, I think it was over 240 corn and over 60, but it's dark green in that part of the world as well. Eastern Ontario, if you look there, boy, they had a good year, no doubt about it. And that is awesome. The downside of those maps is that Wheat Pete knows where he farms up there in that corner of Middlesex County, and he looks at that area and he's seeing what the average yields are, and oh gosh, all I can say is my neighbors are better than me. They get higher yields than I do. Well, it's all good. I will keep trying to be better. Hey, Virginia, and also another text caller or text message coming in saying, Peter, you know, we watched the session on nutrient uptake and partitioning in wheat from the Ontario Ag Conference. And what is going on? Because you say that a 104 bushel wheat crop only removes 33 pounds of phosphorus. Oh, good catch. It's 33 pounds of actual phosphorus. All the other charts you will look at is P2O5 equivalent. If you do the math, 33 pounds of actual phosphorus is the same, it's 33 kilograms per hectare, is the same as 77 kilograms per hectare of P2O5, which converts to 69 pounds of pounds per acre of P2O5, and the 69 pounds per acre of P2O5 at 104 bushels per acre, I believe, that lines up pretty good with the OMAF number of 68 at 100 bushel per acre. So it's bang on. It's just that we're using elemental P as opposed to P2O5. And if you go to Australia and you look at their recommendations, they never talk P2O5. It's always actual P. Same with potash. We're K2O. If you look at the K numbers on that presentation, they're off as well because we're talking actual K. Everything else in North America is K2O. Go to Australia, it's actual K. So sometimes those numbers you got to be a wee bit careful with. But great catch, no question about that. Hey, sustainability. Man, you know, Colin Chappell spoke at the Ontario Ag Conference, and he said, don't lose the narrative. And he's ever so right. And I go to the MWAC, the Midwestern Ontario Ag Conference portion of the Ontario Ag Conference last Friday, and Dr. Jane Fife is there talking about biologicals, and she has on her slide, you know, regenerative agriculture, sustainability, and one of the bullet points is reduce synthetic inputs. And I'm going, how does that make it regenerative? And now, to be fair, she's talking about biologicals, and she'd rather we find biologicals to replace synthetics, but man, I still look at phosphorus and potash, and if we don't have enough, then we know we get lower yields, and low yields do not make a regenerative farmer or a sustainable farmer. And this continued focus on reduced synthetics, I think we have to get out in front of that and do a better job. It's not that I'm saying, you know, put on all the pesticides you can, but boy, this continued mindset that any of these terms mean you have to reduce synthetics, I just don't buy that. Okay, I want to move on. And hey, from Picton, Trevor saying, okay, Peter, here's the scenario. Do we put liquid nitrogen on our wheat or dry nitrogen on our wheat or both? And here's the background. We switched a few years back from 35 gallons per acre of 28%. 28% got too expensive. We went to 120 pounds of nitrogen as urea. We made that transition perfectly. And in fact, over the years that we did the 120 of nitrogen, we actually upped our yields a bit, like almost by 20 bushels per acre. Johnson immediately says, wait a minute, 35 gallons of 28, that's 105 pounds of nitrogen versus 120 pounds of nitrogen as urea. Okay, that's telling me something, but, you know, good. But then Trevor says, but yeah, man, trying to get uniform application with dry fertilizer, that is a real stretch. And so last year, one field plugged nozzle on the airflow unit, and you could see that strip up and down the field, and all the neighbors say, what happened there, Trevor? Yep, that's the way it happens, absolutely. So Uncle Larry came in with 15 gallons of 28%, and the yellow strips disappeared, and that was by far their best yielding wheat at 150 bushels per acre. And so Trevor's question is it liquid? Is it dry? Is it both? What's the best management? Well, first off, I really do like the split nitrogen application where we go really early. And if you look at the nitrogen uptake curves that I've been talking about, I'm happy to send them to anybody that doesn't go to meetings, but wow, like that nitrogen demand is early. It really is early. And so going early with a dry application, getting 50 pounds of nitrogen on the last frost or right at green up, and having that nitrogen to stimulate head production or maintain all the heads that we can in that crop, that goes on really nicely as dry with ammonium sulfate to get your sulfur on. Generally, ammonium sulfate is cheaper per pound of sulfur than ammonium thiosulfate. It's not the end of the world, but it just is a nice program. And then you come back in with liquid with the big shot kind of right at growth stage 30, 31 when we get into the massive uptake on that nitrogen. So that is by far my preferred program. So it's a mix. Doesn't mean you can't do it all with liquid. Doesn't mean you can't do it all with dry. But I really do like the major shot of nitrogen on wheat with liquid because of the uniformity of application, man. It's just so uniform. Anyway, it's a long message about that, but I think it's an interesting discussion because the other thing I pull out of Trevor's is, man, we went from 105 to 120 and we gained yield, and then we added another 45 to that, so we're at 165, and we gained maybe as much as 30 more bushels. Says to me, Trevor, you need to apply more nitrogen. You need to kind of be targeting up in that 150 and do the plots for sure. But I think that is the other message that comes out of that. Hey, Jeff from Saskatchewan saying, all right, I sideband or mid-row band my phosphorus, but I also put G22. So that's the I think it's 622 1 sulfur, something like that. It's the new G24, the new 624-6 that has sulfur with it, and that G22 is on the seed. Do I need in-furrow map? Like, do I need to split my, like, what is, can I do better? And the answer is no. That's sort of a relay fertilizer program. The seed germinates. This is spring wheat, of course. The seed germinates. The liquid's right there. It gets that. It puts the roots out. Now, mid-row band depends if you're on 10 or 12-inch rows where you fit there in Western Canada, but after a while, the wheat roots will get to that mid-row band and take off, and that mid-row band can keep up the phosphorus. The only downside is that the G22 is a very expensive source of phosphorus. If you could split your map and put some map right in furrow and still do the side band, perhaps you could do it more cheaply, but there's nothing wrong with that program, that's for sure. Hey, from Minnesota, Glenn saying, okay, Peter, I'm going to plant some wheat this spring wheat here in Minnesota. By the way, my latitude puts me right about Chatsworth, Ontario. So, okay, you're in a great spring wheat area from a latitude standpoint. They can grow great spring wheat at Chatsworth for sure. Has a Kinsey planter, but he has no seed drill. And his question is, I have wheat plates for the Kinsey planter. So do I run over the field, twice and get 15-inch rows, or 3 times to try to get 10-inch rows with that Kinsey planter, or do I just broadcast the wheat and disc it in? Based on what you said last week, I'm really thinking broadcast and disc. So this is a great chance to do a plot, although it's a bit of a pain in the neck, where you actually, because spring compaction, if you drive over those wheat rows and it's a bit damp that you've already planted, and you just can't do it. And even Glenn said that he's going to drive on wheat rows to get the narrow rows with the planter in the spring and compacting that if it's damp. I think that's a problem. However, we haven't got enough replications or enough data to know for sure that the broadcast and disc would work. So a plot would be great. If you push me, I'm going to go broadcast and disc because I just think the compaction is going to beat you up too bad. Moving on, Mark saying, hey, Peter, so you talked a little bit about this broadcast wheat and getting treated wheat seed in the soybeans. We had one field. So this is Mark from Napanee that has done this for a long time, had great success. One field last year where we had treated wheat seed in the sample. It was a variety that really high yield variety, but it got white mold like crazy. I think that's why there's just something that the wheat hung up. But when it's dry, and I didn't know this, Mark, so this is really, I think, interesting. Mark said when it's dry and they've broadcast wheat into the standing soybeans, if it's been dry after that, they pull the air reels off so the air reel doesn't blow any of that broadcast wheat seed into the combine. And so now there's a management tip that we really hadn't talked about. The other part of that is that they caught it. When they went to start dumping, they caught the treated wheat seed, and so then they cleaned it out. And Mark says in our system, once in a while it happens, but we watch for it, and then we will just run it over the cleaning screen and take the wheat out, and we still have marketable soybeans. The challenge, Mark, I think, for the average grower is they don't have their own elevator system, and if you're delivering that to an elevator here in southwestern Ontario, that's a real problem. But interesting that's sort of Mark's discussion. Hey, we talked about coated clover seed last week, and Carl sent me a text saying, absolutely no to coated clover seed. He says he had trials the coated clover seed because there's less seed. The stand was much, much reduced. Buy uncoated clover seed and put on enough clover seed, period. And Dan Petker, that's one of his keys to clover success, is 12 pounds per acre of clover seed. This isn't what we found in our trials. 8 was enough in our trials, but regardless, coated clover seed, just probably not the way we want to go. Meanwhile, Brett saying, oh, Peter, clover seed is expensive. It's almost the price of alfalfa. Would I be better just to use alfalfa in my winter wheat? And the answer is no, Brett, you wouldn't be, because alfalfa, two things. It's not as frost tolerant in the early spring if you happen to get that low temperature. But the real kicker is that alfalfa is not very shade tolerant. Clover is much more shade tolerant. The level of success of alfalfa into winter wheat is very poor. It's tough enough to get clover. It's even tougher to get alfalfa. So I think that's a non-starter. Meanwhile, a caller from PEI saying, Peter, we've got put clover into our barley, and double cut clover just gives us all sorts of grief. Too much green clover in the sample. What about white clover? Does it give me as much nitrogen production? And so my answer would be that no, white clover does not. The stellar stars, for sure, from a nitrogen production standpoint, is red clover. Whether it's double cut's slightly better, 10% better, in fact, than single cut clover, but they're the two stars. And when you move to a white clover, it will certainly stay low. It's not going to cause a problem at harvest, but two things. It spreads by stolons. It doesn't have a very strong root system. If you want roots for soil health and to build soil, white clover is not going to compare to red clover, whether it's double or single cut. And my other comment would be, use single cut red clover, because if you truly get single cut red clover, it probably won't get over, that sort of 10 inches high is sort of the maximum, often only 8 inches high. And you can cut the barley without getting that green in it. Maybe not if you want to shave the straw. Then the white clover might be the choice. But from a nitrogen standpoint, no, stick with the red clover. And I would say stick with single cut red clover. Hey, I'm going to run out of time before I do the cover crops thing. We'll do it next week. I think it's a really cool discussion. One last quick note. Josh sending me some data and saying, Peter, we did trials. At the V10, we pulled soil nitrates, so we're talking corn now. V10, V12, we pulled soil nitrates. Man, those soil nitrates were incredibly low. So we went out, we thought we needed more nitrogen, we put more nitrogen on, we got no yield gain. Well, that is because when the corn crop gets into the rapid growth phase, so basically after about V6 or certainly after V7, V8, it sucks all the nitrogen out of the soil. Like, as the soil releases nitrate, it just pulls it into the plant. And so that research data is really, really clear that soil nitrate levels in corn approach zero regardless of nitrogen application or nitrogen status of the plant. Really interesting that happens. But by tassel timing and grain fill, those nitrates are very much near zero. So taking a V10 or a V12 soil nitrate and trying to utilize that for nitrogen recommendations, man, we just don't have that data. Full stop. We don't have that data. And I'm not at all surprised that it was low, and I'm not at all surprised you didn't get a yield response to added nitrogen. Hey, I'm way over time. That's it. That's all. On behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture, this is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, January 24th. Make those phone calls. And if you get a chance, send Pete a message with a question so that I'll have more to talk about when I run out of time next week. See you then.